The Nordics stand at a defining crossroads. This is a region that already generates over 90% of its electricity from low-carbon sources and ranks among the most digitalized economies in the world, plus one of the most equitable healthcare systems globally. Yet powerful forces are converging. Geopolitical instability, energy security concerns, AI-driven disruption, and intensifying global competition. And these shifts are deeply interconnected. Energy, technology, and healthcare must evolve through digital tools and new delivery models. The real question is not whether change is coming, it's how Nordic leaders will shape it. And to explore that question, I'm delighted to be joined by leaders at the forefront of this transformation. Today, I'm joined by Steinar Sønsteby, CEO of Atea, an IT infrastructure company based and founded here in the Nordics. Steinar, hi. Thank you so much for joining us for this Pivot Points takeover in Oslo.
Well, thank you for inviting me. We met before, haven't we?
We have, yeah. Thank you. You are actually our first returning guest on Pivot Points, so delighted to have you back. I think for those who haven't listened to that earlier episode, there are some real treats and nuggets in there for them to find, tattoo being one of them, I think.
Yeah, the tattoo actually made some splash, didn't it?
It did for sure. Steinar, for our listeners who might not have caught that prior episode, did you just want to give a quick introduction to yourself and your business, Atea?
Yeah, so I'm Norwegian. I've lived most of my life in Norway, but also outside in many different countries. I think my time in the U.S. at the university, I loved the university, by the way, and the time I had there. So the U.S. has made an impact, and in many ways are the reason I'm in the industry I'm in. So I've become 64 years old, so I've experienced quite a bit. When it comes to Atea, an IT company, as I said, the US kind of introduced me to that. I've grown up in the industry. We are now 9,000 people in Northern Europe. We are an infrastructure company, meaning that we are selling IT infrastructure, either through selling products or selling IT as a service. So a lot of our people are service people or consultants that work with clients in the Nordic and the Baltic.
Fantastic. I think that number's grown, by the way, since we last spoke to you, the number of your people.
It does, and amazingly, last year we passed into 6 billion euro in revenue, and so I don't know what to say, because it wasn't like that when I started. What it feels like some years ago, but it's many years ago, of course.
Yeah, an amazing growth story. Well, we'll definitely come on to that in a bit more detail later on. But today's conversation, the intent behind this is to just take a step back for a moment and think about the Nordics as a region. So the Nordics seem to be at a particular inflection point at the moment, be that economically or in terms of the influence that it has on the political stage. And just as we were having a quick chat before this podcast, you painted a bit of a picture of the history of the Nordics and Norway in particular. And I think for our listeners who aren't so familiar with the region, it would be great if you could just provide that context on Norway's growth as a nation, actually, from where it was perhaps in the 60s to where it is today.
Sure. And let me just say, when we focus a little bit of Norway right now, of course, it's because we're sitting here in Oslo. Sweden has a very proud, long history of being bigger than Sweden. But Norway, when I were born, we were, I think, second poorest nation in Europe after Albania. And that all changed beginning of the 70s, or through the 70s, through finding the oil in the North Sea. And today, fast forwarding, Norway is probably one of the richest country per capita in the world. and we are no longer an oil and gas nation, really, even though we still have a lot of oil and gas. We're more of a finance nation. So a lot of things have happened just in my lifespan. And the position of Norway, but also Finland, of course, with the longest border to Russia of all, the position of these countries creates, I would say, a more specific role right now than ever. But we are small countries, and that also influences on how we can do stuff.
And though small in population size, potentially, also quite large in terms of influence and
Highly
scale.
educated,
Yeah.
highly educated, very early adapters of new technology. We don't have, all the people to pour into tasks. We'll probably get into some of these industries in this conversation. But and nations where trust is something you have and are yours to lose, and not something you really build over time. It's something you are given. So if we meet, I trust you. And for some people that seems a little strange, because I'm kind of giving you my trust without having, learned that I can do that. But when it is lost, it's really hard to get it back. I don't know if I've ever turned back to anyone that has disappointed me. You move on.
And if you're thinking about a business and a brand that's operating and the loss of trust, how do you rebuild it? That's a fascinating topic, and we'll definitely get into that as we go through this.
Absolutely takes time in this region.
Yeah, but the region itself, I guess, you painted that story of growth within the nation. I think particularly now in this moment, it feels like quite a pivotal moment for the Nordics as a region. What's changed? Why do you think that is?
Yeah. So first of all, we are a stable part of the world in a very unstable environment. I think that helps. We have a position which has become, it's always kind of been important, but it feels much more important now from a defense point of view. So the spending from local, but also NATO, as all the countries now are members of NATO, is growing tremendously fast. So I think that will influence the region for years and years. And I think through that, we're also listened to in a little bit of a different way. The disadvantage we have because of the size is that we have very small home markets. It's difficult to build something from Norway or Sweden, even though it's easier in Sweden, and then become a world-known brand. So that takes quite a bit of talent to make that happen. But internally in the Nordics, we really feel the importance of the position in this geopolitical chaos, I must say.
Chaos is the right word, for sure. I think, you touched on something really interesting there around Nordic businesses and their role and influence externally to the Nordics. I'm wondering, what do you think at an international level businesses can learn from the Nordics?
I think trust is an interesting word or even concept. It's really efficient to run something when there is trust. So no matter having it, given it, worked on it, achieved it, having trust in a culture, so where the employees trust the company and the company trusts and delegates to the employees, makes a massive difference on efficiency. Of course, also on loyalty and then turnover and all of those kind of things. But on efficiency, I think it's underestimated quality to have trust, which leads to efficiency. And I think that is something, when I travel and I see different things, I don't feel that a lot of companies have that trust in their employees. And I think that is a mistake. I don't think you need to centralize all decisions and say, hey, we are better than all the employees. I think you can actually develop a culture where trust is embedded in it, and I think that is a winner.
And I know you're really passionate about culture and building an intentional culture, aren't you? But practically for our listeners, what does that look like to instill that sense of trust within your team and your culture as a business and your ways of working?
So first of all, when you're building a company with I call it an operating system of culture and trust, the hiring process is extremely important. And to me, it's just understanding that I am not knowing everything. I'm not best at everything. And the people who are just around me, if we are 10, 12 people and we have 9,000 employees, just the concept that we would know more than them about the customers, about, life in places we've probably been once every second year. It's just, there's something wrong in that thinking that I would know more or we would know more or, even close. And so to me, to build a culture is really to have give them that understanding that that is actually the way I see it. I see them as better, and therefore I delegate and I trust you to do the best for the company. If we need you, then I expect you to step up. But if you need us, you can expect us to step up for you. And I've never met someone that have gone through life without needing someone. And if we can be that place that gets more out of you when we need it, and you can get a little bit more out of us when you need it, and we can delegate and we can have that trust, even though you do mistakes, I do mistakes, there is nothing as expensive to fire someone that did a mistake, because the learning goes as well as the person. And so if we can capture that learning from that mistake, we become stronger, and we'll certainly not do that mistake again. And so, all of these kind of things are basically how I see it. And we're trying to infuse that in all the managers in the company. It's difficult because we're now 1,000 managers on different levels, and none of us are perfect. But it's the belief that 3 are stronger than 1, and hundreds are absolutely stronger than 10s. And, I wonder sometimes when I discuss with other leaders around the world why they don't see that.
Do you think it's cultural?
I think there is some cultural thing here, absolutely. And I think there is some tradition, how you structure a company. There are certain cultures, without mentioning any of my friends, where centralizing seems to become the natural answer to everything. To me, it's the opposite. When people come visiting us and they, you're this and this big, and you're, and they see there is probably, I don't know, I probably have 12 people in the group. We're running a company of 9,000 people. And but it's not true, really, because there are a lot of people that are working other places around in the organization that I lean on. They don't have to. And, the best thing is if they don't sit where I sit or where I was supposed to sit, but are in the business. And we can use them at different times for different things. So delegate as much as possible, trust people, take away rules. Rules are interesting to me because if we were leading a company and we hired some consultants to make some rules on how people behave in the company, and then we send it out, and we think that we or they have understood every single situation that our employees can get into. and made rules that fit to that everywhere they are in any situation at any time. That would be pretty unique if you can make rules that way. Even the tax system has holes, you know? And so what if we took away those rules and said, hey, here's what we're trying to achieve. This is what Atea is about. This is what we want to do. This is how we want to behave. It's up to you to find the best way in each one situation that you get into their 9,000, 10,000 employees. That's pretty powerful.
Very powerful and very unique, I think, from a cultural standpoint. Just to switch gears now, I think you're a growing technology business, right? And you've mentioned already that you've grown even since the last time we spoke with you, Steinar, which is excellent. But what are some of the unique dynamics that you're facing, or that you're coming across as a Norwegian Nordic founded technology business on the international stage? Because as you mentioned earlier, there is some political chaos afoot right now, and I'm intrigued in your perspective on how to operate at an international level as well as within the Nordics as a region.
Yeah, so I think there are there are several perspectives to that topic. First of all, we were really worried when Trump was starting talking about tariffs. You know, how would that change our situation? Now, none of the products we sell is actually produced in the US. So that proved to be less of a problem. We're not selling to the US, and we're not buying anything from the US. So, you know, that kind of calmed down, but a lot of our customers are influenced by that, of course. But luckily, most of our customers, and I should say 60% of our business is done through public. So of course, they're not as much influenced by this. So that proved to not be such a big problem either. But that was more of you know, how will the finances change things? And then, of course, we've lived for a long time to know, to be aware of, can you use or can you not use Chinese technology or Chinese companies technology-wise? So that is something we learned. Now a lot of European and Nordic customers are being more cautious about how they should think about American technology or American technology companies. That becomes much more difficult in our industry because you really cannot get away from American technology. So I'm a little confused when it comes to how the politicians communicate on this, because I'm not confused about where our technology comes from. I'm not confused about where it's put together. None of it is in the U.S., even though it's U.S.-based, you know, companies. But I'm confused on what the politicians think that we should do as an alternative. I don't know if they've even thought through it. I am inviting myself these days to politicians in the Nordics to talk to them about this, because we need to understand you're confusing the customers, and we need to have a clearer and better answer than what we have now, than just say, try to get away from this and this. At the same time, we buy cars from both China and the US, and they are today computers on wheels. So I don't know what they really want us to do, but it becomes a little difficult when you both have a unpredictable world and you have unpredictable messaging from the leaders. I think people are worried, as they are. Let's, as leaders, try to take away worry instead of include more worry.
Job's often to try and simplify the very, very complex, isn't it? And how has this very, very complex environment that you're describing, how has that changed the way you're thinking about resilience and how to lead the business? Because as things become more and more complex, it becomes very, very hard to cut through with clarity, doesn't it? When the story seems to change on a bi-weekly basis.
Yeah. So one thing that I always go back to when something becomes unclear or uncertain is massive communication.
Hmm.
You have to communicate. As a leader, I'm communicating more than ever. Just before I came down here, I made a new video that comes out on Friday to all my employees about exactly this. I need to let them know that we are doing everything we can. We are using our balance sheet to buy inventory. We're doing everything we can. As managers, we are more out with customers than ever before, and we are communicating to the employees more than ever before. And keep your head cool and focus forward. But there's also some interesting things that I think you always see, and that I normally say that when the wind blows harder, you need to be stronger.
Hmm.
And that's what we're trying to be. And as the biggest and the strongest IT company in this region, we'll probably end up taking market share through this. But it's because we are clear and keep our head cool.
Yeah, you touch on something fascinating there, which is, in any time of challenge, there is, of course, opportunity, right? And everything we touched on at the beginning around the financial resilience of the region and the stability of the region. Do you think that the current geopolitical landscape presents opportunity for the Nordics if they lean into some of the qualities that we've spoken about through the course of this conversation?
I absolutely think. And I think we have to use that situation that way because, as I said, we are situated where we are, and that has become more interesting to everybody. But it also gives us opportunities, with all the investments in defense. There's many companies in the Nordics that are suppliers to defense. In Norway, most people know Kongsberg, one of the biggest industry companies in the country. You have companies in all the Nordic countries that are really doing well. They can invest to the future and not just harvest the sales right now, which will actually be good for the whole country because they're so big compared to other big companies in other countries. We are, especially in Norway, but the region is full of energy. So oil, gas, hydro energy, which we export. I read the other day that between 30 and 40% of all energy consumed in Europe now come from Norway. So there are absolutely opportunities. No region have more fish. And we all need food, don't we? So I think there are absolutely opportunities, and if you look into the history of this region, we have proven to be pretty resilient. We don't have to go all the way back to the Viking Age to see that.
No, very true. Is there anything you think that could potentially hold the region back?
There absolutely is, and it's because we are too few people. There are too many tasks for the number of people we are. And so I think we touched briefly before this recording on healthcare, for instance. We are fortunate to be one of the parts of the world where people live the longest. That creates a strain on the health system. If we are going to develop new industries, we also need hands on deck. I think the education system will help us because we can utilize a higher percentage of the population for difficult tasks or educated tasks. But we need to invest in technology, and of course, being in the industry I am, I'm really happy that there is nothing that Norway, Sweden, Finland, Denmark, the Baltic states need to solve the next 10, 15, 20 years that we're not going to be involved in. It has to be solved by technology.
Well, you add AI into this equation, of course, which is just a fraction of technology, but so many of the industries and sectors that we're talking about here, where Norway does play, or the Nordics play a leading role on the international stage. Energy, healthcare, technology. These are the very sectors that are shaping society, right? Play a huge role in the shaping and development of societies, both within the region and internationally. Adding AI into that equation, what are you seeing? What are you foreseeing, I guess, in terms of the next few years ahead of us, and how AI will potentially change or transform that?
Yeah, so two things around that. First of all, and we'll get back to that, I guess, AI will change. I mean, if there are people out there thinking that it'll pass, or, it's one of the biggest things that have happened ever. I know there are medicines, there are things in our history that have been really, really important, but AI will absolutely change the way we live, work, and play. And if we use it correctly, and we have the possibility, because of the finances and the educated population, if we use it correctly, it is the solution to the less hands on deck issue. And so there will absolutely be tasks that we are doing, that humans are doing today, that will not be done by humans 3 years from now. And so let's embrace that and use those people where we need them, because we absolutely need more people. Healthcare was mentioned, but anything, we need people. So AI can be, but we can't be afraid of new technology. I mean, it's been proven so many times that people who are afraid of the future will not succeed.
Mm-hmm.
Talking about AI, I think it's true to say that humans have this way of overestimating the change in short term and underestimating in long term. I think it's the same thing here. Because it hasn't changed the world yet, some people are starting to think it will not. It absolutely will. It takes a little bit of time. And right now, we have issues in the industry and in the world, because AI is eating all the technology that can be produced. And if they were allowed, they would have taken all the technology that was developed and produced. And so if the biggest companies in the world, the smartest finance people in the world, are spending so much money on AI, why do you think you know better and say that it will not?
Mm-hmm.
It's an interesting thing, back to culture. Don't think that you know better than everybody.
Mm-hmm.
It is a tremendous technology, and it didn't come here yesterday. It's something that been developed over years and years and years. And I sometimes say it's interesting because the best chess player in the world is Norwegian, isn't he? Magnus Carlsen. And he played a computer back, I think it was 1995. Or he didn't, but chess players did. And so Magnus have said many times that playing a computer is just silly because I'll lose every single time. And so we've had smart computers, call it machine learning or call it AI or call it whatever you want. We've had smart computers for a long time. So this is just development that has been grooming for a long time.
Mm. The race definitely feels on, doesn't it, to be the nation or the region that is leading the charge with AI. It is top of the agenda globally. Do you think the Nordics is well positioned right now to play a leading role in AI's influence, as you're speaking to at the moment, on all of these different industries?
I mean, you used the word tipping point, didn't you? For a certain reason. Earlier in this conversation, I think that hasn't been decided yet, if we are or not, be one of the winners. I think that there are a huge fight going on when it comes to having the technology or owning the technology, being the leaders in developing the technology around the world. And we are certainly not in that race. So what we have to do to be winners in the race is to be the best at adapting and using and taking advantage of the technology. And that is something as I said earlier, because of the level of education and the size of the company and the trust that are ingrained in our culture, I think we have the opportunity to grab that. I don't think we are running for it as hard as I would like to see.
Mm. If you were to, well, as you are, I'm sure in your day to day, how do you prioritize? What do you prioritize when it comes to these advancements in technology?
So, it's interesting because people are saying, well, you're an IT company. What should we do? Well, we're also a company. I'm also leading a company, not only IT that we sell to others. And so we're running for it internally. And so we have somewhere around 4,000 agents alive working for Atea right now. So 1/3 of, if you put 4,000 on top of, about 1/3 of the registered workers are actually AI. We have internal, push to use. So we work closely with Microsoft. Everybody that wants Copilot are getting Copilot. Some people say it's expensive. I say it's cheap if you get the value out of it. So as a company, you need to take the value out of it. And we are automating as much as we can. And then we are making that available for our customers. So we're not perfect. We're working hard. It's difficult sometimes, but this is what we've done. So if you want us to work with you on these kind of things, you can come and see what we've done. There is no secret here. If you want to do it in a different way, you do it in a different way. We can sell you the infrastructure anyway. I am worried that we're not moving, that Atea itself internally are not moving fast enough. And I think all our customers, leaders in all our customers, should worry about the same thing. I'm not trying to say that we should revolutionize the world today. I'm just saying that we're moving too slow. And Atea is one of the companies. We are pushing as hard as we can, but we're moving too slow.
Mm. And we've talked a lot about trust through the course of this conversation. It seems to be the currency of business in this region, particularly. You mentioned it at the beginning that it's a prerequisite, right? One that we trust one another. When it is lost, and we need to dive into this in a bit more detail, how do you rebuild it? But so too am I wondering, in an era of AI, is that affecting the trust we have in one another? Are you sensing that with your stakeholders and your customers, that actually trust is becoming harder to attain in an era of AI? We seem to mistrust more often than we used to.
I'm not sure if Norwegians or Nordic people trust each other less because of AI. But we certainly can't trust all the answers we get from AI, as you couldn't from Googling before quote unquote AI. So I think we have to understand that technology is not perfect, as humans are not perfect. I could ask you a question and you could answer, but it might not be the correct one, even though I trusted you. So it's just there. You're searching knowledge and answers, and not everybody and all the answers you get are correct. So there needs to be a human factor there. You need to judge the answers you get, if it comes from people or if it comes from technology. But I can't say that I've seen that people trust each other less, but I certainly feel that people are trusting technology less, or the answers they get from technology less. And I'm not sure if that is the correct approach to it, because as I said, I don't know if it was correct before AI either. And so let's hope it doesn't influence how we trust each other.
Yeah, we certainly can hope, at least, can't we?
Yeah.
That's the case. And when you do lose the trust of your stakeholders, particularly in this region when it's so difficult to build that back, I'm sure a lot of our listeners will be thinking, well, where do you start then? How do you go about rebuilding trust within the Nordics? What advice would you give to someone who's trying to reestablish trust with their
Yeah.
stakeholders?
I'm not sure I have all the answers to that question, because it's first of all, it's difficult. That's for sure. It takes time. And we have a saying in Norway, especially, but all in the Nordics countries, that if you have made a mistake, then you have to admit it as quickly as possible. Say sorry, really mean sorry. If you don't mean it, don't say it, and start building from there. The longer it takes for you to say I'm sorry, the more difficult it becomes. And it's it's difficult because you were given trust. You didn't earn it. You were given it, and now you have broken that relationship. And so I'm not sure if I want to forgive you, ever. Um, and so it's difficult, but I think it has to start by immediately, or as quickly as possible. You have to admit to what that happened, and then start building from there.
And at an individual level, I think that's really, really intriguing. I guess at a corporate level, at an organizational level, you're in the business of long-term partnerships with your clients, of course. How do you leverage brand as a strategic asset to do some of the qualities, I guess, in a human to human interaction you're talking about, to build trust, to build your reputation? Are you finding that the way you leverage brand today has changed perhaps to how you used to?
There's more noise.
Yeah.
It's more difficult to get out there with your message. To me, there is only one way of building a strong brand, and that is to build a strong culture. It's not your marketing dollars, it's your employees. I'm not saying that is the only thing you should do, but if you don't have that, and it's the same thing, if you make a mistake as a company, I mean, a big mistake that taunts your brand, starts with your employees. Start talking to your employees and make a plan for how you can bring them back on board, because probably if something like that happens, you also lose confidence or trust or both with your employees. So, we're a business to business only. I am business to business. And so the employees is everything. You have to start there. And I'm not talking about rebuilding or building. I'm talking about in general. That is where it starts, and that is where my belief and my tattoo comes from. It's like my employees is by far the most important thing. I know you should say the customer is, but it really isn't to me. It's the employees, and if I treat them well, they'll treat our customers well, and the customers knows that. And then, of course, you need to be, and you guys know this better than me, but a brand is not built on a lie. It's built on a truth. And so communication has to be truthfully and honest. And it starts internally. So it's not only your marketing that has to be truthfully, but every single employee needs to live that brand and that part of the brand, that we are trustworthy. And so we measure this every year. And I was very happy to see, for instance, just a couple of months ago, we got back that we were the most trustworthy brand in Denmark. And as I've spent a year in Denmark, I was very, very happy to see that. But it starts internally.
Well, I think that's a very good note to zoom out from, actually, and think. We started this conversation thinking about the Nordics as a region, and if we were to fast forward 10 years from now, what role would you like to see the Nordics playing on an international stage, and what do you think the Nordics needs to prioritize?
Yeah, so first of all, I have to say that I hope that the world has become a little calmer and predictable and trustworthy. And but I hope that we will be a place where technology thrives, and not because we necessarily develop it, but because we are good at using it, and that we combine technology so that we integrate different technologies in a meaningful way. And we have done this before, through exploring, for instance, the oil and gas from the North Sea, which were not given difficult task, environment, deep, all of those kind of things. So we have seen this before. We've seen in some of the healthcare situations in the region where we are very early adapters of technology in that line of business. So I hope that we have created an environment and knowledge, skills to take advantage of the technology. And AI, of course, is one that we have touched on, but there are many other technologies, and also outside digital, that I hope that, developing food, there are a lot of different areas where we need to use technology, medicine. Um, I hope that we in the Nordic can be a place where we are known for how to attract value from technology.
Mm. And how to have an impact on all of these really meaningful things that you've spoken about with us today, Steinar.
And I think we do have the environment where we can do that. And we've spoken plenty of trust today, but if we can do it and people have trust in us, why shouldn't that be a skill that we could export?
What's the one thing you think we need to get right?
Oh, that would be the $10 billion question, I guess. But I really think we have to embrace the future. And I mean that in a wider way, but we're speaking about technology. We need to embrace. We can't be afraid. We can't think that we can stop development of technology. It never worked. It won't work in the future. So I really hope that we embrace the new technology. There are both sides to any coin, but there are a positive side to every coin also. And so we need to embrace it. We need to develop the skills. We need to educate people in how to use that technology in a good way.
Well, if anyone will lead from the front, Steinar, I have no doubt it will be you. It's always a real pleasure to speak with you. So thank you so much for joining us this afternoon.
Thank you.